Can we turn back time and change our lives? Keep watching. This is Life Mastery Gym. I'm Damon, and I teach people just like you cutting-edge NLP processes and techniques so that you can master your life and take charge of your destiny. So if that sounds good, make sure you click that subscribe button right down here so you can get these videos on a regular basis. In this video, I'm going to teach you an NLP technique that has to do with time. It is a very simple but extremely effective technique that will have wide-ranging effects on your life. I've been studying and practicing NLP for years, and then I eventually became a coach and a teacher, and the technique that we're going to go through today is one that I use almost every time when I'm coaching someone to take changes that we make and not only make them experience these new changes and experience a new awareness and maybe even a new sense of self, but to make it feel like that person always had this, which is actually the truth. You think that a lot of changes you need to make are completely new. They're actually not. It's more about creating a new awareness that you always had it. And when you feel that, it'll feel extremely secure, extremely certain, which will then give you more confidence. Ever have a bad day or even a bad week or maybe even a bad year? Have you ever had a bad decade? Well, a lot of people could say that 2020 has been the worst year of their lives, and I completely understand. I've experienced not only this thing that we're all experiencing, this pandemic, but I've had a lot of personal setbacks this year, and I keep telling people I'm ready to bury this year. I'm ready for this year to be over with. So what really happens when you say something like that? Well, I had a bad day, or I had a bad week. How many people say I had a good day? Some people do. Or I had a good week, a good year. I had a great last 10 years of my life. Or that marriage was terrible. Or that marriage is really great. You know, we say these things, and I think we often say this more about the negative than the positive. We're more likely to say we had a bad day, week, year, whatever, or bad marriage. And we're less likely to say we had a good day, week, year, or good marriage. It doesn't have to be marriage, but what I want to use when I say marriage, I'm using sort of an event that also takes into the context of time as well. So it's both a happening and it has to do with time. And we can use, for this technique, we can use something like that. To understand this technique, it would probably be helpful if you chose something like this. If you think there has been a bad day that you've had recently, or a bad week, a bad year. If you can think of any of these, this will be very useful to walk through this exercise as I explain it. So what really happens when we have a bad day? Let's start off with something very simple like that, a bad day. Now, does that mean that every second, every moment of that day was somehow bad? Of course not. What happened actually? Well, what probably happened is more than one bad thing happened. Maybe you got a notice from the IRS that you owed more money, and that doesn't feel too good. And then maybe you stubbed your toe. And then maybe we can add on something else. Maybe your girlfriend or your boyfriend broke up with you. Sounds like a pretty bad day to me. So what is happening here? We're putting all of our attention on three things that didn't go well. And I find myself doing this as well. I'm just as guilty as anyone else. When we start to string together events and then put a time frame on them, like, okay, these three events happened in this day, so I'm using the time frame of this day, and then I say, okay, I had a bad day. I draw a conclusion. I make an evaluation. It's very hard to undo an evaluation. It's very hard to undo a conclusion like this, which is why we want to stay more open and less judgmental, but we tend to do this. And then we could look at a year. And we could say, okay, this year, and I can look back on my own life and actually my own depressions that I've had, and I can say, wow, those were really bad years. And I can look at all the things that were happening. But the truth is, there were a lot of good things that were happening. I just didn't feel good about myself. And I looked for chances or events to sort of hang that on. You say, oh, well, there was this event, and then there was that event. And so I can look at that. And just like your bad day, you can look at the things that didn't go well and then take a step back and say, but was that the only thing that happened? Just like I mentioned, not every moment of that day was bad. Just like during my depressions, not every moment was depressing. In fact, there were a lot of not depressing things that happened. Well, we do something that's called spreading, and this comes directly from Steve Andreas' self-concept model. Spreading. we take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 events, we slap a time frame on them, we put our attention on that, and then we judge it and we say that's bad or that's good. And we do this for things that are good. We do spread for good. So think about a day, a year, a decade that you might think of as bad, or you put some type of judgment on it. A lot of times people judge themselves and they say, oh yeah, that was that relationship that I was in, that was my relationship where I had low self-esteem. And maybe there was a lot of truth to that. Maybe the person you were with was very passive aggressive or very narcissistic, and you felt bad about yourself a lot during that relationship. But you were not only in that relationship, you had other parts of your life that might have been actually going quite well. You just decided to spread the fact that you experienced some lack of self-worth or some low self-esteem across that entire relationship. Now, what I mentioned, like a marriage, you can think of a marriage that maybe lasted 10 years. And the first 9 years of the marriage was maybe actually a good marriage. But that last year just really went bad. It went south, and it maybe ended in a nasty divorce. So we put all our attention on that 1 year and we say, oh yeah, that was a terrible marriage, or it was a really bad marriage. It's like, well, wait a minute, isn't that a little lopsided? If there was 9 good years and 1 bad year, shouldn't we be saying, for the most part, it was a good marriage, it just ended? That would be a more accurate way to look at it. Now, regardless of what is accurate or not, we can choose the evaluation we want to make of these things. And I would highly recommend that if you look back on your life and you think of any big experiences like that, I'd start with the big ones and say, okay, wow, I do really think of parts of my life, these different parts of my life. Well, that was a bad 4 years, or that was whatever that is negative. It might not just be bad. It might be more specific. In fact, it's even better if it's more specific. How are you evaluating these periods of your life? And then go back in and say, okay, well, what else was going on there? Because there had to be some good things going on there. When you think about when I think about the times that I've been depressed, there actually wasn't a lot to be depressed about. There was definitely some things to be depressed about. But if I thought about a 24-hour day, in a day that when I was depressed, majority of that day, nothing bad happened. The majority of that day, nothing sad or depressing happened. But I chose to experience it that way. I was experiencing life through depression. Therefore, I sorted information. I looked for the bad stuff to only confirm what I was feeling. And then when there wasn't those things, I just still had that decision of, well, this is just not good. It's just bad. It's sad. It's depressing. So go back over your life and look at those things and then start identifying what actually went well and what was good about it, and start spreading in the other direction. This might sound so simple, and the truth is, it is. But just because it's simple doesn't mean it doesn't work, because you do this naturally anyway. You're doing this naturally. You're spreading. And most of us are spreading more negativity than we're spreading something that's more positive. So what do you think is going to serve you more? Of course, being more positive is going to serve you better than being more negative. Now, this doesn't mean that you're unrealistic. It doesn't mean that you overlook any negative things that happened. That's just it. You accept those as being part of this, but you spread the positive so that when you evaluate this part of your life, you find something useful about it. You find something that is helpful about it. Doesn't mean that you try to gloss over or paint over all the negative things. Those negative things actually teach us a lot, so we don't want to forget them. But you can spread the feeling you have about that time period. You can spread the sense you have about it, the evaluation you make of it, to something much more useful than what most of us are doing. Everyone experiences time a little bit differently. So if you start with the big stuff, you start with the big periods of your life and you find that really challenging, then try something small. Go with a 1 day period. You think of the last time you said to yourself or to anyone else, that was a bad day. Okay, go back and take that day and then ask yourself, what really happened in that day that made it bad? Now, if you're going for the more big picture, if it was a year of your life, same thing. Go back, ask yourself, what really went bad during that year that I'm focusing on, that I'm making this judgment it was a bad year? And again, it helps if you're more specific, like how was it bad? And then start shifting your attention to, well, what was not bad? Even if it was just like nothing was happening, that's fine. That is an example of not bad. And then also start looking for things that were actually good, that were positive. You know, I didn't get killed in a car accident. Nobody punched me in the face today. You know, we can start with something that small, and actually thinking of things that are a little absurd will actually put you in a good mood, put you in a good place to sort of be more open about this rather than closed off and judgmental about these times in your life. So do that, give it a try, and notice that if you do this enough, you will flip that time period. You will have a different evaluation of it. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go back to these time periods and say, oh, that was a great time in my life. Maybe it wasn't actually a great time in your life, but when you look back on it, what would you want? How would you want to evaluate this time so that it's something that's more useful to you? You could say, wow, that was a time in my life where I learned a lot. Now, isn't that better than saying that was a time in my life that was just terrible? There's nothing you can do with that. There's nothing useful about evaluating a part of your life as just being terrible. But if you can look at it as it was terrible, but a lot of good things happened, therefore I learned a lot. I learned how to overcome adversity. I'm still here. Everything's fine. So find something useful. Find a more useful evaluation for those time periods by shifting your focus on the things that weren't bad and the things that were good, and then spread that across time. This is extremely powerful when you do it. And we can also take an additional shortcut. So you can think of times in your life that didn't go well. And then you can think of how would you have rathered it be? Like if you were more resourceful, what would those resources be? If it was actually a useful time in your life, a learning time in your life, what would that be? Give it a name. And then once you have a name, ask yourself this: what color would this resource be? What color would this name be? Whatever you want to label it, whatever you want to name it. Ask yourself that question. What color would it be? Some of you are more auditory, so we can do a similar question. We could say, what would that sound like? So if you were X instead of, or if this time in your life was X instead of just bad, what would it sound like? Would it be music? Would it be people talking? Would it be your own voice? If so, what would it be saying? What would it sound like? So we can bring sound into this as well. Now, once you have a color, or once you have a sound or music or whatever it is that you find that matches up with whatever the evaluation is of this time that you would like to have that would be more useful, spread the color and the sound or the music across that time in your life. You can think of it as you have a timeline here. You can think of it any way that you perceive that period of your life. Perceive that period of your life. It's going to be something you're seeing or hearing or both already. And once you have that, then spread the color or spread the sound, and maybe you like both, the color and the sound. That can be very powerful. And spread that across this period of your life. That'll make it much easier for you to bring your attention to the things that went well, that were the opposite of bad, so that you can have a new evaluation. Now imagine you can do this throughout your entire life where you don't see anything necessarily negative or no negative time periods in your life. You see usefulness, you see the positive, you see what is good about those times. When you do that throughout your entire life, how do you think that's going to change how you feel right now? And when you do that and you feel much, much better right now about your life, how do you think that's going to affect you in the future? I don't want to say because I want you to try it out, but I think you know where I'm going with this. It will have a dramatic effect, a dramatically positive effect on your life. And the more you practice this, the more you will find that you do this in real time. When you're having a bad day and you're making that judgment, that's a process. Instead of doing that, you will have a new conscious awareness of doing that, and you can intervene and go, wait a minute, no, I know it's happening, because it does happen quite fast, quite naturally, and for most people quite unconsciously. But if you practice this, now you're aware of it, you go, whoa, wait a minute. I'm in the process of creating a judgment about me having a bad day or a bad week or a bad year. I'm going to stop that right now, and then I'm going to start shifting my attention to, well, what do I want to feel? What would I rather feel? And I'm going to start shifting my attention to the events, the things, whatever, the people that is good about what's happening right now. And you can totally intervene and change this from happening. Like most NLP processes, this is something you naturally do anyway. We're just reverse engineering it. It's something that people mostly do unconsciously anyway. We're becoming conscious of it, And then we're saying, okay, well, I want choice about this. I don't want to just kind of float through life and let my unconscious decide this was a bad year or a bad decade. No, no, no. I'm going to intervene, and I'm going to practice the opposite. And if you practice this enough, unconsciously, you'll start to do it. It's basically like retraining your unconscious to frame things in a more positive, more useful way. Now, if you found this useful and you like this kind of thing, if you like this kind of technique, you're going to love mapping across. I just recently did a video about it, and I give a ton of free materials and resources that you can use to map across areas of your life where you're not feeling very fulfilled to making it feel more fulfilled, like the areas of your life that you are unfulfilled. So if you'd like that checklist, check the description right down here, click on that link, and you'll get access to that free PDF. If you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button and hit the bell so that you'll be notified when I put new videos out. Last but not least, if you have a family member or a friend who you think would benefit from this video, make sure you share it with them. Take care.